I'm just recording this because I just got done with a meeting with one of my professors in my creative writing program, who's a phenomenal prose writer. I'll probably make a video about one of her books later. She's so good. But I had a meeting with her because I just finished writing a short story and wanted to edit it. So I was asking her for some advice. And one of the things she said to do was to read it aloud to get a better sense of the pacing and approaching it from a direction that wasn't just reading it on the page, which I've done like 1,000 times, and so I'm too close to it to be able to judge it. So I'm recording this so I can listen to it back later, hear how it sounds, and know maybe where I want to make some edits. So I'm just going to read it here and maybe post it, and if you like it or have feedback even, feel free to leave a comment. It's going to be a pretty long video because it's a pretty long story. So here we go. Colin walked down the windy street in Corker Hill. His train was due at 16:46. The sky was gray and getting grayer. He carried little with him, a cigarette and a creased paperback copy of Dennis Johnson's Train Dreams. The cover had a black stylized wolf on it. The animal was in profile with one white eye. Laying on its side, Colin felt the wolf could be dead, but that white eye in a sea of black fur seemed so full of potential. Before he had selected the book, Colin did a cursory search on his phone for the author, dead in 2017. He stole the book. He found this satisfying and surprisingly easy. Besides Train Dreams, he only owned 5 books. They sat on his kitchen windowsill. The books were all terribly sun-stained. The first and second books were purchased at a flea market in Greece. They were green hardback books with gold accents. At the bottom of each spine was an image of the moon at various stages of the lunar cycle. One was waning gibbous, the other a waxing crescent. This implied the existence of 6 other books in the set. He did not know how to find them. The books, including the titles, were written in Greek. Owning these books brought Colin a sense of peace and progress. He imagined one day he would learn to read them. As long as he didn't, there would be more time to do so. The third and fourth book were first edition copies of Sylvia Plath's Crossing the Water and Winter Trees. Colin found her writing to be grotesquely gentle, like the soft edge of a dark storm cloud. He enjoyed reading poems out loud in front of the mirror. It made him feel a part of something he could not quite name. These were his favorites, in part because he could read them, and in part because they were the only books he owned he had not acquired himself. The 5th book did not sit on the windowsill. Instead, it sat in an old shoebox tucked beneath Colin's bed. On a trip to Anstruther, Colin entered a charity shop. Errant golf clubs, some with dirt still in the grooves, stuffed animals of no discernible breed, and a chess set with pink and white chessmen lined the sidewalk. He entered in pursuit of no item in particular. The shop proprietor, a lady of perhaps 60, welcomed him. He was the only customer. The carpet was yellow-white. He went back outside, wiped his shoes, and came in once again. He perused the books first. They were organized by not being organized. Colin loved bookstores like this. This chaotic arrangement meant no preconceived notion of what he might find. The shop contained mostly pulp crime novels. These predominated the small coastal towns. Many days on the North Sea descended into gray, windy things, best passed inside with a cup of tea and fictionalized drama. "Do you have any poetry?" he asked. Some of the books were stacked so high he dare not pull anything out from the bottom. These titles were unreadable, but he did not want to leave any stone unturned. "Not in the shop," she said. "Do you have a favorite poet?" The shopkeeper's voice had a sweet, melodic confidence about it Colin found reassuring, even endearing. It was the kind of confidence a voice takes on when a whole life is spent in one place. He envied her cadence, her control. There was an undeniable sense of self in it, as if everyone had a true dialect that could only be uncovered by being firmly entrenched in your environment. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Anstruther," she said. Colin nodded. "I like Sylvia Plath a good deal," he said. His favorite poem was Mushrooms, though he always told people it was Tulips. He thought this a more proper pick. "I just knew you would say that," she said. "Stay right here. Don't go anywhere." The shopkeeper put on a green raincoat and left the store. Colin felt it improper to be in the shop alone, so he waited outside. He dragged his fingernail across the grooves of the golf clubs. The dried dirt fell onto the rain-wet sidewalk, rehydrated. He squashed it under his boot. The proprietor came back with 4 books in her hand. "These are from my own collection. I did my thesis on Sylvia Plath in uni," she said, "on the topic of abortion." "Sylvia Plath had 2 kids," he said. "Yes," she said. "Here, take them. I've read them to death. I'd leave them to my own kids, but they don't care one way or another about her." This seemed to pain her. She blinked for a half-second longer than Colin thought necessary, as if something small but sharp had gotten in her eye. He noticed for the first time the wrinkles around her eyes when she closed them. He took the books. "I think my favorite poem of hers is Mushrooms," he said. She blinked again, this time for the proper amount. She rubbed her palms together and smiled at him. When she took her coat off, her shoulders seemed more taut. "One of my favorites is Morning Song. Do you know it?" Colin shook his head, sorry to disappoint her. She did not seem to notice. "My goodness, love sets you going like a fat gold watch. I think about that line nearly every day." The shopkeeper became more animated with each word, taking on a childlike excitement. She gesticulated wildly, her small hands threading through the air as if she were weaving a cat's cradle only she could see. "You know, I had a friend once who went fishing with Ted Hughes. You know." "Yes, I know." Anyway, she said he recited a poem from memory. She didn't know if it was his or someone else's. It was so dark or grim, no one felt they could say anything when he was finished speaking. So, "You're talking to someone who knows someone who went fishing with Ted Hughes." "It's an honor," he said, and he shook her hand. He looked down at the books for the first time. 2 were Crossing the Water and Winter Trees. He recognized them immediately as first editions. The other 2 were paperbacks, one of Ted Hughes' collected poems, and the other a comparative analysis titled The Art of Sylvia Plath. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "Don't, then. Just go ahead and read the poems. That'll be enough for me." She turned around and walked into the shop without wiping her shoes. Colin followed her in and bought a newly cleaned 7-iron for £3. Inside the cover of each book was the name Helena Mitchell. He donated the paperbacks. He disliked Ted Hughes because he found his work too masculine, too violent. He disliked comparative analysis because it filled his head with thoughts that weren't his own. When he set the 2 first editions in the windowsill, he found them to be exceptionally beautiful. I should write her a letter, he thought, and so he did. He wrote the letter on thick legal pad paper. He bought it new for the occasion. The contents of the letter did not thank her for the books. Instead, Colin enclosed a poem he wrote after reading Crossing the Water. He made sure to emphasize this was a draft, and the thoughts of a Sylvia Plath scholar were more than welcome. The poem was titled The Sea. He was never much good with titles. The poem read, The Sea. White birds, white froth, the wide window of horizon. Who draws that line? It is so precise I might expect to be cut in half. The cliffs, that solid soul of stone, wind blown, sea scraped, its promised life of structure. Sand approaches like old age, to be a thing so stolid. The tide comes like an unwelcome bride, the fluidity of death, her viscous fingers. The bright moon, a ring of finitude, shines as if lit from within. Its light seems impossibly far to those black fish in the black depths of the sea. Faithfully, Colin Farrow. He signed the note faithfully because he read it once in a letter written by Franz Kafka. He signed his last name because it felt like something a poet should do. It did feel slightly wrong to him, though, too impersonal. He felt a feeling surprisingly close to love for her. He posted the letter. Helena Mitchell died days later in the North Sea. She drowned in a strong current during her morning swim. Helena was the fourth and final person to die in the North Sea that year. Her family took solace in this. It was good not to die alone. When she died, her family took on the monumental task of going through her things. Most of her possessions would end up in an estate sale. Her personal effects were collected in a manila folder by her son, Marcus. Among these were a typewritten, unpublished essay titled Sylvia Plath and Abortion, which was filled with never finalized edits penned in green ink, a pile of receipts bound by purple rubber bands, a few Polaroid pictures of family members, some long dead and some newly born, and a poem stuck to the fridge, written on blue legal pad paper, signed by someone named Colin Farrow. Not collected among her personal effects were 2 first-edition copies of Sylvia Plath's poetry, having been distributed to Colin Farrow. Also not collected among her personal effects was a letter addressed to Colin, having been distributed to the postman 3 days before she died. The book sat in the windowsill of Colin's apartment. The letter sat now on the floor of his flat, unopened. He was late for his train. The 16:46 train to Glasgow Central was due in 13 minutes, and he was 17 away. He could run to catch it, but he hated having to run in public. Everyone looked. So he began to run. Nobody looked. The wind abated, but the rain started in earnest. Colin dragged his face along the stinging drops of rain as he ran. I should not have been late, he thought, but he had spent his time rolling and unrolling a cigarette that would not stick together. It closed on the 3rd try. Smoking in the rain was harder than smoking in the not rain, but he found the small sizzle and occasional pop of snubbing out a lit cigarette onto cold, wet pavement immensely satisfying. It was a small sonic contribution to the world, like playing a single note on a triangle in the face of an entire orchestra. The note would be carried away into the sea of sound, indecipherable among the racket, but undoubtedly there. He put his cigarette out and walked down the stairs to the station. The electronic board that announced arrivals and departures in thick orange lines gave 18:48. He was 2 minutes late. The board also gave a weather advisory. Due to inclement weather and wind advisories, all trains subject to delays. The words rolled across the screen, unfurling itself like an ancient scroll. The 1846 train to Glasgow Central was now due at 1851. A mounting pressure he was previously unaware of suddenly released in his chest. He could hear his heartbeat slowing. He could feel his blood trickle into his fingers. A warmth descended that he recognized at once as relief. Colin always used paper tickets. He preferred their tactile nature. Their yellow-white color, bordered in bright orange, made good bookmarks. He opened Train Dreams, removed his old bookmark, and tucked his new ticket in snug, as if putting it to bed. The wind moved with a keenness he hadn't noticed before. A longing to finally be on the train overcame him. He felt almost nostalgic for warmth. He took a seat near the end of the carriage and began to think of his mother. Elise Farrow had been 27 when Colin was born. She met Colin's father, Ethan, at the YMCA. She swam there every Wednesday at 6 o'clock and every other Saturday at 10 a.m. Ethan did odd jobs for the Y for very little money. He had little money to begin with, so any money was worth it. The work was easy, you just had to do it. Elise wore a bright yellow swimming cap with a daisy printed in pale purple on each side. It is what Ethan noticed first. He wore black coveralls whose most distinguishing feature was the permanent outline of a circle pressed into the fabric by a dip can. He stopped scrubbing tiles only to watch her exit the pool. She did not immediately seem like somebody he could love, but he had never loved anyone before, so he kept an open mind. He smelled like cedar wood. This was the first thing Elise noticed. She loved cedar wood. When she walked by him, she made sure to take her swimming cap off quickly. She believed her hair to be her best feature, and most people she knew would agree. It was long, straight, and a color that was hard to pin down, somewhere between brown and red. In a parent-teacher conference once, her grade 5 teacher described it as the color of a shovel left out in the rain for perhaps, let's say 2 or 3 months. Before she entered the locker room, she looked back at Ethan. He looked back at her. He waited for her outside of the plate glass doors. They began to walk toward her car in perfect step with one another. This all seemed perfectly natural. Their first date would be at afternoon mass on Wednesday. If things went well, Elise would skip her swim. Ethan dressed up, wearing his best tie, a red and green tartan with a gold embroidered lion in the center. He closed his eyes during prayer, but was not devout enough to have the hymns memorized. They shared a book that had the lyrics printed beneath a series of musical notes. While turning a page halfway through the first hymn, Elise touched his hand. It could be argued that this is the moment Colin was conceived. Elise skipped her swim. Feeling particularly cleansed of sin, they both went back to Ethan's apartment and made a baby. The sex was very intentional. The baby was not. Ethan was in favor of abortion, citing his little money as the primary issue. Elise was afraid of God, citing eternity in hell as the primary issue. Colin was born in a 4-story hospital in Renfrewshire. They asked the doctor to name him. The doctor's husband was named Colin. 27 days after Colin's naming, his mother died. In the garage one day after dinner, she began sifting through the recycling bin for a can to pour her steak pie fat into. Ethan was sitting in his chair with a book open on his leg. He glanced at the book, then out the window, in turns. A red-chested bird was climbing up the base of a tree in little skips. He could not tell if it was a robin or a chaffinch. Before the book could clarify anything, he heard Elise call out, "Ethan, I want Red to eat underground with dogs and, Ethan, what did you do?" Her words arrived from the echoing garage with an airy eeriness that moved Ethan out of his chair immediately. He knew she did not want Red to eat underground with dogs. He knew she was having a stroke. A shadeless bulb on a thin string of exposed wire lit the garage. The singular point of light cast shadows across her face as she lay slumped on the ground. Ethan almost did not recognize her. The stroke did not kill her. She was taken in an ambulance to the hospital Colin had been born in less than a month before. She came to herself as completely as she ever would, which is to say, she awoke into a new body a few hours later. Her left arm disagreed with her brain. Aphasia enveloped her. Any words she tried to say seemed swallowed before they were ever spoken. This led her to sit for extended periods of time with her mouth hanging ajar, as if it were a gate that, if left open, would eventually let the words out. They never came. Ethan brought his wife, who was not his wife, home 3 days later. Colin's mother, who was not his mother, did not seem to recognize him. She spent her time sitting in a chair with a blanket draped over her legs and the TV on. Colin spent his time crying in the nursery. Ethan spent his time doing the rest. After just 3 days of Elise's return, Ethan went out to pick up diapers, leeks, milk, yellow onions, and 4 lamb chops. In his absence, Elise managed to pull her body through the house, her right hand using the walls for ballast, out into the garage. She took several deep, dragging, difficult breaths. The air was thick, eternally circulating in that closed room. In and out, she continued, as if the room that stole her health still contained it, swirling around in the atmosphere. She tried to breathe it in. She tried to breathe in the past. Instead, she breathed in damp, cold air. It smelled like rainwater and sawdust. She breathed in reality. She took the keys off the wall, started the car, and closed the door. When Ethan walked in the house, he saw the black and white plaid blanket curled like a sleeping dog on the floor. A tremendous quiet settled over the house. He dropped both grocery bags to the floor. He ran to the garage. The light was off. The car was on. Elise was dead on the floor, the gate of her mouth left wide open. Ethan ran his hands over his face and took a deep breath. It smelled like rainwater, sawdust, and cedarwood. Colin continued crying in the next room. On the train, Colin did not think of any of those events. He was not aware of them. He believed his mother had died in a car accident, one of the many half-truths his father had told him before he, too, died too early. There was only one touchstone when thoughts of his mother entered his mind. It was the lone item he owned that had once belonged to her. A small book of red-bonded leather with red ribbon markers titled A Book of Common Prayer. On the inside cover in a cursive hand was the name Elise Farrow, written in blue ink. Colin had a hard time imagining his mother as a devout believer. He first found the book in his father's nightstand when he was 7 years old. It was the first time he had ever seen his mother's handwriting. He flipped through the pages, trying to find more of it. He took the book to his room and began writing the name Elise Farrow over and again on a piece of green construction paper. He tried to mirror it exactly, but he could never get a hold of the loop of the S. That night, his father came into his room and began to yell. It was the only time Colin could remember ever hearing his voice raised. "What have you done with the book, Colin? I swear if you've done something stupid." "It's just there." He pointed to the table and pulled his covers up to his chin. His father's raised voice stripped a safety out of the room he tried to replace with the blanket. He could not meet his father's eyes, focusing instead on the small variations of race cars on his bedspread. His father picked the book up. He picked the green paper up, too. Then he sighed loudly. His voice took on a new tone Colin had not heard before, either. It was no longer threatening, but had an awful quietude to it, like a secret or a distant storm cloud on a clear day. "Look at me," his father said. He looked. His father was crying, soundlessly, but his voice did not quiver. "It's yours. It should have been yours the whole time, but I love you." Colin nodded. "Was Mommy a Christian?" he asked. "She certainly feared God," he said. "Go to sleep now." He walked to the door and turned the light off. The green construction paper in his hand turned black as the light left the room. The ticket inspector was a short woman. She had a mole just above her top lip and a black QR code scanner on her hip. "Tickets," she said. "Any more tickets?" Colin, grateful for the interruption, stopped thinking about his mother. He had to take his knees off the seat to access the gray table in front of him. The ticket was still snugly asleep inside the book. He felt bad for disrupting it. He laid the book face down on the table to mark the page. He set the ticket on the seat next to him. The ticket inspector worked her way down the length of the carriage, trailing small beeps in her wake. All down the train, she trained her gun at QR codes on phones until she reached Colin. She looked down at the ticket disapprovingly. "Right then, very good," she said, and walked into the conductor's carriage. They did not look at each other once. Colin picked Train Dreams up and noticed he was only 13 pages from finishing. He eyed the wolf on the cover. It eyed him back with its white, endless void of eye. He could not keep its gaze. He turned the book over and began to read. It took him a few moments to sink back into the story, but when he did, he quickly fell into it. He turned page after page until he felt the pace of his body begin to slow with the train. Colin shot up from his seat. He checked the time. 17:06. 4 minutes until departure. He shut the book quickly, stuffed it into his waistband, and moved to the doors of the train. He pressed his second and third fingers repeatedly against the open doors button. The green light flashed to life, and the doors slid open with a small hiss. Colin jumped off and once again began to run. He did not care how much attention he drew to himself. He craned his neck as he ran, looking for the closest departure boards. If he could see the name of his train, there was still time. There it was, Oban, departure 17:10, platform 10. Below, the clock read 17:08, 45, 46, 47. He got to the ticket checkpoint with just enough time. He got to the ticket checkpoint and could not find his ticket. There was no time, and there was no way to get any more. Colin walked back to the train and found his ticket still as statuary, laying on the chair. He looked at it disapprovingly. This little fucking piece of paper, he thought. He picked it up and walked slowly toward the ticket checkpoint. The ticket checkpoint of missed connections. He made it through, and walked into the atrium of Glasgow Central. Colin took a chair in the center of the grand room and watched the train from platform 10 silently slide out of the station into the gray mouth of evening. He propped his elbows on his thighs and held his head in his hands. For a long time he listened to the shuffling of other bodies, the swishing of pant legs, the occasional squeak of a shoe, the echoing wail of a baby from across the room. He heard these as if from a great distance. There was only one train to Oban. There were about 8 left back to Corker Hill. There was plenty of time, so he took it. Colin opened his flat door. He never locked it. His flat was inside a building that required a key fob to enter. If anyone broke into his flat, it would be his neighbor, and he was okay with that. He had a few things worth stealing. Those things that were worth stealing would be unidentifiable to his neighbors. He did not wipe his shoes. The floor was littered with mail. He picked up all the bills, flyers, and letters and moved to the kitchen. He took his windbreaker off and hung it on the back of his chair. Colin sat at the table and flipped through the mail. Large white envelopes and flyers addressed to the owner of tenant of Flat 1. He did not open these. If anyone needed to reach him, they would know if he was the owner or tenant in Flat 1. Then, the letters. Colin did not get letters often, either due to his lack of writing them himself or his lack of worthwhile connections. He told himself it was the first, though tended to believe it was the second. There were 2 letters addressed to him, one in a long white envelope and another, thicker one, in an envelope between beige and gray. It was nearly the size of a manila folder. The first was addressed to Colin Farrow, the second addressed to Mr. Colin Farrow. In the top left corner of the long white envelope was the name Helena Mitchell. A mixture of awe, shock, and eagerness moved through him, like dipping a cold foot into a hot bath. The second square envelope had a return address in Aberdeen, coupled with the name Marcus Mitchell. Curiosity and the desire to see its bulky contents broke the seal of this letter first. He pulled out a semi-creased stack of papers. They were held together by 2 black binder clips. He took these off and was sad to see an imprint left behind by their grip. Otherwise, the manuscript was in perfect condition, clearly well taken care of before its journey to his house. He read the title, Sylvia Plath and Abortion. He quickly flipped through it and recognized the handwriting in green ink in the margins. It had the same delicate hand as the name inside Crossing the Water. He set this aside and reached into the folder again. A single sheet of yellow legal pad paper with his name on the outside was folded asymmetrically, as if in great haste. He opened it up and found a handwriting he didn't recognize. Mr. Colin Farrow, it started. He read on. I do not know you, but it seems you knew my mother. I found your letter when cleaning out her townhome. I do not know if she ever posted you back. The date of your letter was rather recent. I regret to inform you that my mother, Helena, has died in a swimming accident in the North Sea. Attached here are 3 documents. A clipping of her obituary, your letter and poem titled The Sea, and a copy of her uni thesis. Forgive me for prying, but I noticed your correspondence concerned Mrs. Sylvia Plath. I have not read the manuscript, though I trust you will be interested in it. Many thanks to you for your letter to my mother. I do not know if she was lonely near the end of her life, but I suspect not. My best to you, Marcus Mitchell. Colin read the letter 2.5 times, once disbelieving, once trying to let the reality of the words into the folds of his begrudging, unaccepting brain, and a half time starting at the words, a clipping of her obituary, a clipping of her obituary, obituary. For a few minutes the words seemed to take on a meaning outside of his understanding, like reading the Greek texts in his windowsill, a cipher that would not reveal itself to him no matter how hard he tried. The obituary was printed on Bible-thin newspaper. There was no picture of her to accompany it, which let Colin believe it could be some mistake, another Helena Mitchell, but the words proved otherwise. He read them slowly, so he would not have to reread them. On the morning of July 22nd, 2025, Helena Mitchell passed away during her morning swim in the North Sea. She lived in Anstruther her whole life and was the owner of Found Objects charity shop. She is survived by her son Marcus and daughter Angela. Helena was 67 years old. Reduced to a list of facts, Colin thought, and the facts did not feel representative. She was also survived by her sweeping handwriting in the cover of her books, just as his own mother was. Helena Mitchell, Elise Farrow. He wondered if Helena feared God. Perhaps so. She had 2 kids of her own. Colin picked up the obituary and letter from Marcus. These he dropped in his recycling bin. He grabbed his own poem, Helena's letter, and her manuscript. They felt far too light in his hands. The lamp in his bedroom cast pale shadows on the walls. He set the papers on the bedspread and lay prone on the floor. He lifted the bedskirt with his left hand and reached until his fingers found cardboard. He pulled out the old shoebox and set this on the bed as well. He took a deep breath in and a slow breath out. The box opened soundlessly. He placed the manuscript atop the red leather cover of the Book of Common Prayer, then his own letter. The letter from Helena he held in his hands and stared at his own name until it blurred into depersonalized black lines. Then he set it, unopened, in the box and returned it to its dark home beneath the bed. That's it.